Well, the whole Coney 2012 thing didn't work, so I guess we're stomping off to war against Nigeria now. As you no doubt have heard by now, the terrorist group Boko Haram kidnapped 300 girls from schools for their own terrorist purposes. Now, thankfully, some of those girls have actually escaped and made their way back to their homes in order to tell us the story of what happened to them. An important question to ask here is, who is Boko Haram? Many sources place its origin with Muhammad Yusuf, who took over the leadership from Malam Lawal and formed it into the group that it is today around 2002. The organization became officially interested in creating a Sharia government in the Borno state. Since then, there have been numerous attacks against government buildings and civilians. So, as far as terrorist groups go, in terms of political aim, there's nothing terribly unique about them. And this, of course, is the pretext that we're supposed to buy into in order to justify the United States Army going into Nigeria. I could, of course, point to the very obvious that the United States Army has killed more girls in Iraq alone than Boko Haram has ever been accused of, and the resulting U.S. invasion, even operation, would kill even more girls. But that's something that everybody else has already said. I could also point out that poverty globally kills 22,000 children every day. It's also very ironic to think about the fact that this poverty that's killed 22,000 children every single day are the same people who are now turning around and championing the imperialist intervention into Nigeria, which would stop suffering that's infinitely smaller than the ones they themselves actually caused. It's really funny, sitting here watching all these white liberals crying about these 300 girls that have been abducted. Meanwhile, they champion the very system that causes something that's thousands of times worse. Of course, don't actually point that out to them because they tend to get really mad when you mention their hand in great suffering. They're okay with criticizing black and poor people, just don't remind the white liberals about their hand in it. This picture actually infuriates me. How many girls has your husband and your patriotism killed? Our girls. The fact is, the United States government has been on a subversive campaign throughout Nigeria for some time now, eavesdropping on politicians, espionage, sabotaging and monitoring, certain really big economic players inside the country, the domestic people. They've been sabotaging certain industries and generally interfering in the functioning of the economy altogether. And this information was already made known to us through Wikileaks cables that were released. According to Wikileaks' article on ACRI, which portrays the ACRI as a counterweight to which was set up by the U.S. to instigate mistrust in Nigerian-dominated ECOMOG, the sense of Nigerian-led anti-American opposition was first observed during the Bush administration when Nigeria, without support from the West or the UN, led the first ever African intervention force on peacekeeping mission to Liberia, while at the same time engaging Sierra Leone in forced peace combat, with predominantly Nigerian troops, over 90%, being spearheaded by then military ruler General Ibrahim Badamorsi Babangida. In this regard, the report further recalled Nigeria's role in helping liberate the southern African countries in the 1970s and 1980s in clear opposition and defiance to the interests of the United States and its Western allies, which resulted in a setback for Western initiatives in Africa at the same time. I would like to point out that there's actually a lot more information on U.S. intervention in Nigeria, but of course that wouldn't fit into this video, so please check the link in the description to get more information on that. The fact is, Nigeria is a major player that's rising in Africa, and they do wield a decent amount of economic power in the region, one that has been traditionally, anti-American, that's been opposed to U.S. influence in the region, and their growing power is a threat, of course, to U.S. imperialism. And of course, no U.S. foreign policy would be complete without some connection to oil. Nigeria is the 12th largest producer of oil in the world. It is the 8th largest exporter of oil in the world, and it has the 10th largest proven reserve of oil left in the world. There are also untapped mineral resources which are frankly astounding. They include natural gas, coal, bauxite, tantalite, gold, tin, iron ore, limestone, niobium, lead, and zinc. Nigeria is also one of the largest exporters of groundnuts, cocoa, and palm oil, and a significant producer of coconut, citrus fruits, maize, pearl millet, cassava, yams, and sugarcane. Now, currently, about 60% of Nigerians, the population, work in the agricultural sector, and Nigeria still has huge areas of underused land, which means there's still much more potential there. And even with all of this, there's still another important reason to remember why the U.S. is making this strategic push into Nigeria at this moment. The influence of Chinese imperialism in Africa is rising. Every day, China gains more and more ground into the as of yet untapped potential of Africa. This is the beginning of another inter-imperialist rivalry. Capital has nowhere but Africa left to expand into. China is doing all it can to make sure that they are the ones to soak up this potential. Meanwhile, the U.S. is struggling to keep up with the Asian superpower due largely to unending wars in the Middle East and the fact, Africans don't really trust Americans. What with that whole slavery thing. What we are looking at is capital's drive to expand into new markets and new resources. And what we are blatantly witnessing is two different sets of capitalist classes contending over those resources. We, of course, have China, and then we have the United States. We are looking at a contradiction between the capitalist classes of two imperialist powers. And this is the kind of situation that would definitely lead us into possibly another Cold War, because we know neither the United States nor China wants to actively engage in a physical war with each other, because the consequences of it would be absolutely devastating. So what we are definitely looking at are the results, or at least the beginnings of an overt expression of inter-imperialist rivalry. But overall, despite the competing interests between both the United States and China, we are looking at the same old thing. The third world is being ground into the dirt through what will become higher levels of exploitation, greater levels of poverty, even greater levels of environmental destruction, all for the sake of the consumption patterns and frankly, the market, the law of value, dictating that value be extracted from the third world and sent to the first world, not only to subsidize the wages of first world workers, but mainly for the appetites of the proletariat and the middle class, and their overuse of resources globally that drives so much poverty in the third world. The real loser here, of course, is going to be the people of Nigeria. These third world people are going to suffer, not just for the desire for resources and consumption that comes from the United States, but now that growing power of the middle class in China as well. Essentially, Africa, and now this way, in an overt way in Nigeria, is being sapped and is now being essentially invaded by two capitalist invading powers. It seems that the United States is taking the initiative on this one, and this seems to be where they want to make their first real, 20th century, this century's stronghold grip on the country. This is what they're trying to be, is their first step. Time will really tell how successful this is going to be. I think this one might be slightly more successful than Coney 2012 really is, because the Coney 2012 thing really spoke to like a bleeding heart liberal kind of idea, whereas the idea of going in and massacring a bunch of Muslims, the radical Islamic militants, can appeal to both sides. It can appeal to the liberal sensibilities of liberals and can pander to the hatred of conservatives. So I really think this is a much better strategy for U.S. imperialism than Coney 2012 really was. But we do, however, have to understand the complexities of what is going on right now. This is essentially, in a manner of speaking, a psyop the United States used to justify imperialist invasion of Nigeria. But we do also have to understand that this is a competition between competing imperialist powers, both the United States and China, where ultimately the loser is going to be the Nigerian people. Thank you for watching. Please comment and rate the video. If you liked it, hit subscribe or check out some of these other great videos. If you wish, share it on social media. While you're at it, why don't you follow me on Twitter? And if you got time, go on over to the MRN bookstore and check out some of the latest books available.